So welcome everyone. Yes, as Andy mentioned, I'm going to talk some about some newer work that I'm been kind of fumbling my way through. The theme is love the problem, as you can see. What we're really trying to do here, as product people, as entrepreneurs, is build better products. And the question we always have to ask ourselves is, how do we define what better is? How do we even kind of uncover those axes of what better really means? Now, along the years, there have been many different approaches. Some of you have lived through some of these cycles. The most recent one is Lean Startup, started around 2009, 2010, almost going on 10 years. And when people think of Lean Startup, I know maybe show of hands, everyone here know kind of basic Lean Startup? Everyone knows like basic Lean Startup? Okay, good. So when we think of Lean Startup, two things often come to mind. The first is this notion of the minimum viable product, and then this build, measure, learn loop, going around the loop as quickly as possible. And the basic premise behind the Lean Startup is, rather than spending long periods of time building something and then realizing it may be something nobody wants, build something faster. So rather than 9 months, take 3 months, take 3 weeks, get something out there, go around this loop, and then iterate, refine from there. The problem with this approach is that while this sounds like a sound practice in theory, just rushing to build an MVP doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful. And the reason for that is, if you start with a good idea and go around this loop, you can go around the loop many times and make the idea better. But if you start with a really bad idea, you just get stuck. So you go around the loop once, and then you realize nobody wants to talk to you, and you chase after them, and they just say, no, what you just showed me is horrible, I'm not going to talk to you. And then you start guessing. And that's when you go down this vicious cycle of what we call the feature, the chase for the mythical feature. You're trying to find that killer feature, you're building more and more stuff, and if you don't get the right feedback, you're just going around the loop multiple times. So lots of people get stuck when they just rush to build that MVP. So we do not advocate starting with MVP. So the MVP is still important. I'm not saying don't build an MVP, but you have to define it first. And so think of it this way: when you start with that MVP, it's like building a key without knowing what door it's going to open. Yes, it's a nice looking MVP, it's a shiny MVP, you're proud of it, but then you have to go find which door to open. And if you simply flip your mindset around and start with the customers and customer problems, start with the doors, the key building for us product folks is a lot easier. And that's the stuff we're really good at. So that in a nutshell is what this mindset is for love the problem, not the solution. Sounds very, very simple. It is a very simple idea, but it doesn't mean it's easy. So there are going to be some challenges, and we'll talk about some of those challenges and some approaches for trying to think beyond kind of solution and into problem. So the first one is this challenge of the innovator's bias. So the innovator's bias is our natural predisposition for solution. Very hard to shut off. I know a number of you probably recognize this tool. This is the Lean Canvas tool, rapid idea sharing. The basic kind of goal here is to try to fill these boxes first. So don't start with solution. Let's make sure that what we are building targets the right customer. We are building problems in the right way. The challenge, of course, is that when people fill out the initial Lean Canvases, our brains play tricks on us. We say, I'm not going to think about solution, but this is actually what happens. So when you've already decided you want to build a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. And so we define problem statements kind of as solutions disguised as problems. And that's kind of a trap we fall into. So the more important thing is knowing that you may be doing this, right? So we find a lot of people unconsciously inventing or faking the problems, or they even go talk to customers, but the way you ask the questions kind of justifies the thing you're building instead of really doing open-ended discovery. Talking to customers, when you go talk to customers, they too will tell you sometimes what they want. But Steve Jobs said it well, it's not the customer's job to know what they want, because oftentimes when you give them the thing they want, they don't even use it. And that's because customers oftentimes will ask for surface level stuff. They will ask for things like, give me this report, or add this button here, that would be a nice thing to do. You know, change the color of this page. You do those things and you realize that that's not really what the problem was. There are other things underlying that. So that's some of the challenges we run into when we just ask customers what they want. So anyone who has managed a backlog of features has probably lived through this. You build the things that customers say they want, and then they don't actually use them. The other challenge, if anyone here is doing a desire-driven product, is I get this question a lot, is how do you fill out the lean canvas for desire-driven products? How do we talk about video games or fashion or movies in this fashion? So how would you frame the problem? You can't go and ask people what problem does Angry Bird solve. That just sounds weird. So is there a better way? So that's what I want to kind of share with you. There is this approach, what I'm calling the Innovators Gift. So contrasted with the innovator's bias, which is I have a solution and I want to see what can I do with it. The Innovator's Gift has a very simple, basic concept, which is all the problems out there are already out there. And so the best way to uncover the new sets of problems to solve is not by trying to invent some new problem, but really discovering it. By studying old solutions, you can find out some of these new problems. The example I often like to give to illustrate this is a little autobiographical story of how I have grown up listening to music. So when I was a young kid, this was my solution for music, and I hope people in the audience can recognize what that is, the cassette tape. I know I'm dating myself here, but that's what I grew up listening, how I grew up listening to music. Now, I knew that people had listened to music many different ways before. There were these black discs, which are making a comeback, but as a kid, that was this weird thing. There was the radio, the phonograph, and compared to that, this was an awesome invention because I could make my own music, I could record it, put it in my Sony Walkman, and life was great. If you had interviewed me and asked me what problems do I have, I would say none. This was just the perfect way for me to consume my music until this thing came along. Now, when the CD came along, it all of a sudden made some of the pet peeves that I had with the cassette tape more serious. It kind of exaggerated them, and that's when I realized that maybe I should switch. One of the most obvious one was, while I could record my own music, I couldn't often find the music I recorded. I would have to catalog it, record all the track numbers, and those of you that have never worked with cassette tapes don't probably know what I'm talking about. But you have to know all the counters, and you have to rewind to the beginning, reset the counter, and then start forwarding back and forth till you found the song you were listening to. So the CD comes along and they boast, better quality, but more important, they boast instant access. You can push a button and the song plays instantly. So that was very powerful. You can play the songs almost immediately. They weren't writable in the beginning, so I didn't switch to them because I wanted to do my own mixtapes and things. But the moment that happened and the price dropped, and my entire music collection switched. In my college years, I had one of this 300 CD changer. That was my entire music collection. I was a proud owner of 200 and something CDs, but it was a very fragile system. So every time as a college student I moved apartments, I had to be very careful with it. Once all the CDs got jumbled, and I just gave up. I never put everything back in there, right? So they were inherent problems, but what could I do? There was nothing better out there. And then we went to the music, kind of the MP3 players. Music started to get digitized. And as you can see, the story I'm telling is the job of listening to music does not change. I'm still listening to the same general music. The output is the same, but how I'm listening to it is changing, and it's causing these massive switches along the way. So first it was Napster. They came out and said, you guys shouldn't buy CDs. That's just an evil thing because you only need a few songs. Only download the songs that you want. They got shut down because they were essentially doing it illegally. Apple came on the scene. MP3 players were already there. They came out with their iPod. Steve Jobs famously said, we only need 1,000 songs. That's what you really listen to. So 1,000 songs in your pocket. You can go on the Apple Music Store and buy the songs you want for 99 cents. And so for many years, I switched from CDs. I now have no CDs. I'm now buying all my songs on the Apple Store, and I'm listening to it digitally on the iPod. Life was good for a while, and then we got these streaming services that come along, and they tell me 1,000 songs, there's so many artists now, 1,000 songs in your pocket, not enough. You need 40 million songs in the cloud, right? So for one low price, you can get all the songs you want. New albums, old albums, doesn't really matter. And so for many years, I haven't bought a single song. I have a subscription to some of these services, and that's how we consume music. So that was all good. And then I had kids, and my kids grew up. And so the early years were fine. They listened to everything I played and liked everything I played. But as they got older, my daughter is now about to become a teenager, developed her own tastes, and now all of a sudden she doesn't want to listen to what I'm listening to. And so she would fight over what song plays in what room. And so we eventually gave in and got these Sonos speakers. And so we gave kind of different rooms their own speakers so they could play their music, we could play our music, and life was okay for a while. But there was still a problem, which is that there was no remote for this. You need a phone to actually switch the songs. We didn't want our kids at that age to have their own phones, and we wanted to limit screen time. So I was, again, the bottleneck. I had to go in there and switch songs, and when you have to do this multiple times, it gets pretty frustrating. And then one day I discovered the Echo devices and Alexa devices, and they have an integration with Sonos, so you can just tell Alexa what song to play, and now this is how we listen to music in my household. Everyone goes around the house barking orders at Alexa, telling her to play this song here and that song there, raise the volume, all this stuff. And that's what happened. That's how we're listening to music. So this little journey is showing how each of these inventions, when they came out, were not in isolation. They didn't come and say, sign up to streaming because streaming is great. They really anchored against a problem with an existing solution. And the switch happens because people look at what they are doing, they see something better, and they then make that move. And these are massive, massive switches. These are not little changes. These are complete migrations from one way of doing things to the other. So if I continue the story on, I know that there's going to be something after my solution here. There's going to be something after the Alexa. I don't know what that is, and that's what makes innovation so fun. There's going to be some invention out in the future because maybe there'll be a privacy breach with Amazon because they're listening to everything you're saying. Something's going to happen where we wouldn't want this interface. Maybe it's virtual reality, maybe it's thought control, maybe it's something else. But there'll be something that will come which will kind of continue the story on. And that's what innovators do, is they search to see how are people consuming things today, find some inefficiencies, and then build on top of that. So again, if we continue this on, so the whole premise here is that studying old solutions, you can find some of these insights. Now, how do we study old solutions? There are a lot of different techniques. There are techniques in the design thinking world, customer journeys and things. Some of you may know what that is, but you can get very elaborate. This is the customer journey of how people buy rail tickets, and you can get very elaborate and figure out the whole process. We often will build personas, very rich personas of customers. Now, in the early stages, I find that a lot of this is just too much information. When you have an idea, trying to build these elaborate, even like all the information on that, while interesting, may not all be that actionable. So I'm going to share with you a much simpler model, and this model is built on behavioral kind of psychology. So how do people really buy products, and what are the forces that influence them? And that, if you can capture some of those insights, it gives you starting places to figure out what are some of the struggles or problems without necessarily starting with problems. So you can't start with problems because of all the reasons I talked about, but this is kind of an alternate approach for doing that. So it's built a lot on these forces. We'll kind of illustrate this with an example, but this is essentially a subset of a customer journey. We want to understand how do people consume, how do people buy products, why do they buy products, what causes them to do that, and we're going to do this not by doing elaborate customer journey studies, but just trying to answer a few questions and try to unpack these four forces. There's a push, pull, inertia, and trigger, and friction. The reason that the other approaches like personas are overkill, it's not because they aren't important. When you're at scale, it's important to build these rich personas because you have many different customer segments. But in the early days, we're looking just for early adopters. So we're trying to find our best ideal single customer segment. So you want to simplify. We're not trying to find the most number of distinguishing characteristics, but rather the least number of distinguishing characteristics that correlate with our customer. So let's put this to actually, instead of like walking through just the forces canvas, I'll ask you a question and we'll kind of illustrate that with the forces canvas. So let's say you're a mattress company, you sell a mattress that alleviates back pain. It's been scientifically proven, it's built on memory foam, so it's good instead of spring coils. You want to market that. What time of day is the best time to run an ad for that? Anyone? Morning, nighttime. Maybe I'm looking for specific time. So 8 a.m. when people wake up.
3 a.m.
Yeah. So people are laughing. So either that's the right answer or it's a funny answer, but it is close to being the right answer. And so the reason is that. So if we kind of unpack this, I guess the first thing to kind of highlight is that there is a good time, there is a bad time, and there's a good time to advertise. If people are busy and doing other things, they haven't been triggered, and that's what this Forces Canvas is first trying to help us identify, is what's the triggering event. So if I've got back pain, there's going to be a time and day when that pain is triggered. The morning is good because I may have had a sleepless night, and I wake up in the morning, I have this expectation violation of having a bad night's of sleep. The problem is that in the morning you are competing with a lot of other things. You have to get to work, maybe you have kids, they have to get to work. You're not going to have 30 minutes to go do research for mattress. I sometimes hear people saying before you go to bed, because maybe the previous night was not a restful night. But there too, we are just naturally lazy. I'd much rather watch Game of Thrones or something else than go do research for mattress. So we always procrastinate for something else. But at 2 a.m. at night when I can't sleep, I have this expectation violation. My desired outcome is I need to find a solution to go back to sleep, right? So that's prime time. And so someone said 3 a.m. This is actually an actual case study from a mattress company that sells the most number of mattresses between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. So that is the hot period. It's because of this. So they find that people can go back to sleep. Now, even then, there's a lot of inertia in the way. People are not going to wake up and say, this is the night, I'm going to go buy a mattress. They're going to do other things, like maybe take a painkiller or take a sleeping pill or browse the internet or go on watch Game of Thrones on TV. And that's what the mattress company is actually hoping you'll do. So they know that when you go on the internet, they can show you an ad. They know that when you go on browsing on the TV, they can put their mattress infomercial in there. And so that's how they get your attention. So they put an offer in front of you, and then you begin to get attracted by the pull of that offer. So that's what the pull force is. Memory foam is better than spring coils. That gets your attention because you say, I have a spring coil, what's so different about it? And then you can kind of see what starts to happen is there is the inertia kind of changes because now your desired outcome is, should I buy a new mattress? Maybe I want this better mattress because that's been the cause for my back pain. The inertia and the friction change, and we have this tug of war. So inertia is basically familiarity of the old. I already have a mattress. Should I really buy it? And so we ask that question. Friction is basically anxiety for the new. Should I really buy this new mattress? It's $1,000 or whatever the price is. Should I invest in that? Is that a smart decision? So we kind of go. This is called the battle of the forces. So all these forces are going on in a customer's head. And if you can unpack them, and we do this through interviewing, if you can understand how they bought something and label these forces, you get a lot of insight into what's influencing them. Now, if a purchase happens, some of these forces have to win out. And it's basic physics. The ones in the top have to beat the ones in the bottom. Otherwise, you're not going up the hill. So this person might start watching the infomercial. And as you know, infomercials are geared at just sucking you in. So every 30 minutes, there's a price drop. And that's kind of tempting. So you keep watching more. There are more testimonials from customers. They have a scientist come on and talk about how this was used in NASA. And that seems very compelling. And then they give you a 1-year money back. So it's like, buy our mattress. If we believe it so much that if you don't like it, you have a year to give it back. You are helpless. At that point, it's 3:30 a.m. or whatever that time is. You give in and you wake up the next morning and say, honey, guess what? I bought a mattress last night, right? So it seems like an impulsive buy. You'll have to justify that in the morning. But at that moment in time, it was a perfect storm. It was built that way to where that conversion is going to happen because it was built on that trigger and it was working on all those forces. And this is generally the kind of unpacking. If you can unpack where people are triggered and what are some of the things that are influencing them, you can begin to understand these forces and you can then begin to build not so much better products, but market the products better or emphasize certain problems over others, which then allow for this kind of conversion to happen. Now, the initial purchase is just the first part because we know that we can return this mattress. So you cannot just use this to build a crappy product and then try to pawn it off someone because they're going to have to go through a process of trying it out. And that's what we call the activation phase or the aha moment. So I'll try it out. Is it really comfortable? Do I have a restful night? I'll have repeat usage, and then it becomes a habit, and that's the habit moment. And even in this journey, there are going to be the forces that are playing against each other. And so that's another thing. Today I'm going to focus mostly just on the initial purchase, but you can do this kind of analysis even further down to see, are there problems in usage? Are there problems in someone adopting a product? And those could be problems worth solving. And as you can imagine, this is not a journey that ends here. It actually continues on to the next step. So if I buy this mattress and it's memory foam, well, guess what? And if I like memory foam, what about my pillows? Maybe I should change my pillows and get memory foam pillows. What about the cushion in my car? Maybe my back would be more happy if I had a backrest that was memory foam. And so you start potentially buying more things. So one trigger can create a cascade effect to buy multiple things, and the journey then continues on from there. So this is that customer forces model. And so again, there is a canvas here that you can use. I'll kind of point to some links at the bottom that you can kind of use, and there are techniques for how you uncover these forces that I'll just allude to. I want to share another example, and I want to highlight something different about how to think of customer forces. Because when a lot of people think of customer forces, if you're familiar with jobs to be done or outcome type of thinking, a lot of what I was talking about would seem familiar or something you recognize, because that's what is the basis of jobs to be done and outcome-driven innovation. Many times we'll use this example, and maybe you've seen this quote before. So people don't want a 1/4-inch drill bit, they want a 1/4-inch hole. So the idea is, don't just think about tools, think about what the tools do. So think about the whole that people are creating and try to find problems in that story. So if you look at this picture, anyone see any problems here? We can shout out some answers.
Makes a mess.
It makes a mess, yeah, that's one problem. It's not perfectly round. Yeah, so there are those kinds of things. So even if you look at this process, so if you look at the triggering event, let's say I'm a new homeowner, I bought a new house, I have empty walls, I want to hang some tools in my shed, I need to go buy, I need a hole, so I can buy a drill bit. So I go and buy this drill set and drill bit. There's a lot of anxiety. The first problem I would say is just the hole. Like, is it in the right place? I have to make sure, and I measure, and again, I'm very do-it-yourself challenged, so I have to measure multiple times. If there are 2 holes, I have to make sure it's all level. I have to make sure there's no stud in the back, and if you don't, your drill bit is going to break. So I've broken many drill bits not knowing that, and so it's just a learning process. They're going to make a lot of mistakes, and those are all problems that could potentially be solved by someone. Then there's the mess problem. So I didn't expect that to happen. So now I have to go back into the house and bring a broom and something to pick it up with, make that go away. I have another future problem, which is a hole. It may not be a problem today because I'm going to cover it up with something. But 6 months down the road, when I have to go and move my tools somewhere else or try to move, if I made a mistake even in the first hole, I've got now this hole that I've got to go patch. That's another trip to the hardware store, buy more things, some paint, clean that all up. So that's kind of all the problems that you can get to. Now, this is where when people do these kinds of studies, if you're a drill bit manufacturer, it's very tempting to stay in the solution space. So you might only focus in on, when people drill into concrete, their drill bits are breaking. So let's just build a stronger drill bit, right? And that's better. Maybe you will sell more drill bits because you have got this titanium drill bit out there. But that is still stuck in the solution space. You can make these incremental improvements, but they're not as interesting as some of the innovations that you guys are in the room to do. This works for what we call sustaining innovation. So I can make a product slightly better, but it's not necessarily going to be an innovation that's going to cause switch. So if we go back to this statement, I have 2 issues with it. So while I will of course attribute this is a Harvard professor who came up with it. It changed our perspective on thinking in terms of outcomes and not just features and benefits. But 2 issues I have with it. One is that it's too broad. So people in general, very, very broad. We want to narrow that down. So who could be users of drill bits? Could be construction workers, could be homeowners. We'll stick with homeowners for now. The other thing that I have is it says they want a 1/4-inch hole, but a 1/4-inch hole is not a desired outcome. Nobody wants that in their wall, right? So this is an intermediate step, and this is how you know this is not what you need to optimize for. We need to optimize for the job or the thing people are trying to do after that. So this is where you can start to go to that bigger context, start to think beyond just the product. So every product lives in the product context where features and benefits are, needs are, and then the bigger context is where you find wants, where you find desire. And that's what we want to be searching for. Because if you can help your customers achieve their desires, achieve those wants, that's where you get a lot of more exciting things. So let's kind of level up. A very simple technique for doing it is 5 whys. So somebody bought a drill bit. Why did they buy a drill bit? Because they want to drill a hole. Well, nobody wants a hole, so let's not stop there. Why do they want a hole? Because they had to get some hooks and secure those hooks. And even that's not desired. I'm not going to leave hooks in my wall. But so we go one level up. They want to now hang a painting. They're in this art kind of space. And that's now all of a sudden interesting. And I could pause here and say, how can I get them to hang a painting without drilling a hole? And that's where we can get more innovative thinking. A company like 3M literally took that to heart and built this mounting tape. So they build a lot of chemicals. They found this glue which can hold up enough weight. And so they build this mounting tape, 30 pounds, 13.4 kilos. I think it goes up to 60 pounds now. And so you can go to the hardware store looking for a drill bit. Next to it, magically, you find this mounting tape. And then you do the math and say, instead of spending $100 for the drill set and another $20 for the drill bit, I can just spend $20 on this and I can hang my painting. And I have no holes, no mess. I hope it peels off next, and that's another problem. Every solution has problems. Someone else will discover that and solve for that. But that's a way you can kind of compete. So glue can compete with a drill bit, and that's when we think broader. We can have these types of things coexist. Now we could go even one level higher, and this is where we have a bit of the Goldilocks problem. Like, when do we stop? And most people stay stuck in the bottom, and so I'm just encouraging you to go up one level, go up 2 levels. So if you go up another level, why do people want to hang a painting? Because they want to decorate their home, they want to show some artwork. You could explore that. So where do you get art? I want good art, but good art is expensive. I have these cheap prints. At the same time, I want to change my art every so often. That's a hassle because I get tired of them. So how do you solve that problem? Now, if you're Samsung, you can solve it this way. Now, this may look like a painting, but it's not. It's a TV. So Samsung builds this low, kind of low. It's a matte finish screen that, when it's off, actually looks like a piece of art. And they build a frame around the TV so it actually looks like a painting. Their tagline is "TV when it's on, art when it's off." It's easy to understand, and if you want to buy a TV, you could buy this one. So this is what they do, and they even happily will sell you a subscription to the art store, so you can change up the art as often as you like. Right? So we started with the drill bit, and we ended up with selling more TVs. So this is, again, the power of this kind of thinking. And when you have the triggers, you can go in, again, to the hardware store, target new homeowners. When they're looking to buy a drill bit, you could show them an ad for your Samsung frame TV, and maybe they wouldn't buy the drill bit, and they need to buy a new TV because they're in a new house, they'll go buy your TV. Right? So that's how these types of things can potentially work. Now, this is where things can get very metaphysical. So why do people want more art to express themselves? And then beyond that, I don't know what the answers are. What's the meaning of life, right? So you can start to get very, very metaphysical if you keep going higher and higher up. So you have to know when to stop. But the message here is, don't stay stuck in undesired outcomes like a hole in the wall. Get to at least the first desired outcome where there's emotion, where there are wants. And if you can get even a level higher, you might even find more opportunities. And that may be enough. So 1 or 2 levels above that intermediate could be good enough. Here's a quote that I read many years ago that changed my perspective on how I look at products I build. So it's by, she was a blogger. She's written a few books now, Kathy Sierra. She talked about how you shouldn't think about just building a better X. So don't think about building a better product. Build a better user of that product. So whether I'm a drill bit manufacturer or I'm Samsung or I'm 3M, this is the way you apply that. So it's not about better drill bits, it's about better homeowners. What are they trying to do? How can you make them kind of have a better home, whatever better means for them, and then figure out what's in their way that's holding them back. Like, I want my home to be beautiful, I want more art. How can I give you art that can change every day? So asking those kinds of questions. So it's in these bigger contexts that you find more interesting spaces for innovation. And when you search for the bigger contexts, as I said before, the problems become obvious. You can find people struggling to achieve those desired outcomes, and that's when you can go back to your lean canvases and find more specific problems that are anchored against existing alternatives, not things that you kind of imagine or invent on your own. So that's what I wanted to share with you, some of the newer work that I'm doing. There is some more information. The canvas is something you can download here if you want to dig into it a little bit more. Thank you.